Now that we've examined the data and come up with a plan for what kinds of questions we want to answer, the next step in cleaning the data is to simplify what we're working with. So the actual data that we have in most cases includes rows and columns that we're not actually going to need in order to answer the questions we're asking. And so we're going to take care of those, and we're also going to clean up the names a little bit. So starting from the top, as we said before, this data is okay for now. It doesn't really need any cleaning for the names. And then next, from the SQLite database, we have salary information. And I think the two questions that I want to answer are the highest paid job by title, or maybe the highest paid 20 or 10 jobs by title, and the jobs that have the most employees under that job title. So all of the rest of these columns I'm not going to need. I don't need employee name. The only pay that I really need is probably total pay benefits, which seems to be the sum of total pay and benefits. I might want to do something with year, but I'm going to keep this simple and not worry about year just yet. And then I don't care about agency. Pretty much the only other column that I care about is the job title column. So that's actually job title and total pay with benefits. So let's start by just pulling out those two columns. And let me go to the end here, and I'm going to add a cell. And then I'm going to switch this to Markdown and use do a level 3 header, clean the jobs data. And then under that, let's go ahead and add another one. And then first thing I'm going to do is only select the columns I need, which are total pay benefits and job title. So I have my data frame, or I need to reload my data frame. So let's go ahead and open a connection and read the contents of the salaries table. And then here in DF, I have the salaries table. So the way I select columns from that is by using square brackets. And then inside of the square brackets, instead of specifying what rows I want to retrieve, what I do instead is just give a list of columns. So I want total pay, benefits, and job title. And actually that should be a piece of text as well, like so. And if I execute that, what I get back is just those two columns. So I get a data frame coming back with just those two columns. Now, this doesn't actually change the data frame itself. So if I go ahead and display the data frame again, you see all of the columns are still in the data frame. So what this does is it basically essentially makes a copy. It doesn't quite copy the underlying data, but it builds something on top of it that only includes those columns, and then returns that rather than modifying it in place. So what I want to do is say something like selected is equal to data frame, and then I can display selected here. Okay, so that leaves all my original data in the data frame, but gives me the columns that I'm interested in selected. Now, you can also explicitly drop columns out of the data frame using the drop method on data frames. And that will destructively remove the columns from the data frame. But I actually like to keep the data around in case I need it later, and I have no particular need to delete it. I'm not short on memory or anything, so So I'm just going to select what I want rather than deleting what I don't want. So that gives me the two columns that I'm interested in, along with an index. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to filter out some of these rows. So in particular, I don't want any of the rows where job title is not provided. And I don't want any of the rows where total pay is 0. So let's go ahead and filter rows out. And the way you do that is by writing a query, essentially. So I can say selected, and then inside the square brackets, I can put a condition. And so what I want is selected square bracket for total pay benefits. Or actually, let me use double quotes just for consistency. So selected of total pay benefits is not equal to 0.0. And then in addition to that, I want to use and. So I have to put this in parentheses. Just it's a fluke of the way pandas is written, but I have to put this whole thing in parentheses here, and then use ampersand for and then another set of parentheses, close off the square brackets, and then in this condition, it's going to be selected square bracket job title, and that's going to be not equal to the string not provided. So that's my second condition. And then what this is going to do basically is this whole thing is going to get evaluated, and because selected is a data frame, what this is going to return is a series of true and false values. So this whole thing is going to evaluate to a series of true and false values, one for each row. And then when you put a series of true and false values inside of these square brackets for selected, that's going to pull out the rows where the value is true and leave out the rows where the value is false. So this will only give me the rows where selected total pay benefits is not equal to 0 and selected job title is not equal to provided. And then let's go ahead and display what filtered looks like. And you see we have two columns from before because we started with selected, and then we skipped the rows where we had zeros, and we also skipped the rows where we had not provided. And then if we want to actually take a look at what we have here, we can explore filtered and see what that looks like. So we have two columns with 148,000 values, and then 142,000 distinct values of total pay benefits, 2,100 distinct values of job title, and then a summary of what kinds of values we see. Now, the other thing that we could do is we could rename these columns, but I think they're already pretty descriptive. So I think basically we've simplified this data as much as we need to. And then moving on to the next one, so we have mental health and tech. And for this one, I want to also look at let's look at the job titles that have the highest proportion of employees who have a mental health disorder. And so that would be, let's see, there's so many of these. So let's go with, have you been diagnosed with a mental health condition by a medical professional? And we're going to get the percentage of people that that answered yes for that. And then we're going to break that down by job title, which is that was near the end. Do you work remotely? Actually, what was that? Let me scroll towards the end here. Which of the following best describes your work position? So we want this column, and I'm just going to copy that. And these names are really long and awkward, so we're definitely going to want to rename those. So let's go ahead and I'm going to scroll to the bottom here. So here's where we're exploring the data frame. Let's go ahead and add another cell for Markdown. And then this will be simplify the data. And then we'll add another cell under here. Let's make sure that I actually have the right data there, and I do. So the first column we want is going to be selected is equal to data frame square bracket, and then I want this column. And then the other column I want is diagnosed. Have you been diagnosed with a mental health condition by a medical professional? Okay. And then let's go ahead and look at what we have here. So I have those two columns. Now, in terms of the actual field values, we're going to be dealing with those in the next step. So now I'm just selecting the data that I actually want. Let's go ahead and explore selected and see if there's any rows that we want to filter in or out. So these are all non-null values. We have 264 distinct work positions listed. We only have 2 values for mental health, so there's no NAs or anything in there. And then summary of the first values, so backend developer, front. Some of these are separated with bars for multiple values, but I think that's okay. And then just yes or no. So I don't think we need to do anything to clean up the rows here. We can just use selected. So actually, let me just, for consistency, let's say filtered is equal to selected. And then to rename, you want to use the rename method. So selected, actually, let's do that before there. So selected dot rename. And then to rename the column, you give it a columns parameter, which has a dictionary. And so the dictionary is going to have a key and a value, key value pairs. So for each of these columns that I want to rename, let's take this column, and then I want to rename that to position. So that's easier. And then the other one, let me reformat that a little bit so it's a little easier to read. So for this one, let's go ahead and rename it to diagnosed. Okay, and then after we've renamed those columns, I can display my filtered results. And actually, there's another argument. So when I execute this, it does not modify the data frame in place. It returns a new data frame with the values changed. So let's go ahead and say filtered is equal to that. And then let's look at it. And then let me get rid of that explore there. And then here's my final result. So I have a position column and a diagnosed column. So the next data set that we're going to look at is this iris data, and this is already clean, so it doesn't need anything in particular. I'm going to use all of the rows and all of the columns. And then for the poll data, I'm only really interested in the, let's say, start date and the information and answers. So I'm only going to pull out those two columns. And then for rows, I actually do want to do quite a bit of filtering. So let me go ahead and fetch the data again. So fetch the data. And then after this explore, let's go ahead and add a column. And actually, we had that already. So let me cut that column I just added. Let me scroll to the bottom here. That was all the values. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there that I really don't need. So I'm just going to get rid of that last one there, that explore that has all the information in there. Okay, so here I'm going to actually get rid of this. And let's make this a Markdown. And then let's simplify the poll data. And then for this one, I'm actually going to make my simplified data. So we'll say selected is equal to poll data, square bracket, square bracket. And then the first column I'm interested in is going to be the start date, I think. What is it? Yeah, start date in lower camel case. And the second column I'm interested in is going to be in answers. And I'm not actually going to use all of answers. I'm going to do some revision to that, but oh, no, it's start date. There. So I have two columns. And now to filter rows, let me actually do that first. So let me filter the rows first and then pull the columns out of it. So this time, filtered is going to be equal to poll data. And then the columns that I'm interested in are poll data, square bracket, and I want subgroup to be all. Actually, let's look at this. I did need to explore this again. I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and look at let me look at what I have for some of these columns here. So let's go ahead and do poll data, square bracket, subgroup, and then let's call unique on that. And then let's print that. And we'll print subgroup as well. And then population. And let's see what we have for those two columns. So subgroup is all polls or just adults or just registered voters or voters. And then population is all registered voters, likely voters, and voters. So So what we want is subgroup is all polls and population is A. So in my query, that's going to be poll data subgroup is equal all polls and poll data square bracket population is equal A. So just those two conditions. And then that'll give me the filtered, and then I can select the columns from filtered. Okay. And then let's go ahead and explore the result here. Well, I can't actually explore that because of answers. So when we're going to write a query that's going to pull out the values in answers and create new columns from the total approval and total disapproval. But we're going to do that in a later step. So I think this is all we need to do for now. And then the next is building with the data frame constructor, which we don't have to worry about. So that's really all we're going to do for cleaning and simplifying the data.